Доброго ранку, шановні.
Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. We greet you at UCMC Press Center. The topic of press briefing, every investigator of socially important information should be legally protected. Our guests are Schaaf, director of Freedom House NGO in Ukraine, Iryna Kushnir, co-founder of the Ukrainian Human Rights Institute, Oksana, Nesterenko, executive director of the Interdisciplinary Scientific and Educational Center for Combating Corruption in Ukraine, Lyudmyla, Tyagnyryadno, program director of the Blueprint for Free Speech NGO in Ukraine, and Olexander, Kalitenko, legal advisor, Transparency International Ukraine. Welcome. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm Lyudmyla Tyagnyryadno. I represent the NGO Blueprint for Free Speech. This is Australian and German organization, and we protect investigators, and we protect freedom of speech and expression of opinion. And together with my colleague Oksana Nesterenko, we were involved in the process of discussions of one of draft law that was proposed by Mr. Bishopka, a deputy head of the Office of the President, concerning investigators of information. And we deal with this topic for a long time with our colleagues. We have 11 initiatives united, many international experts to deal with issues concerning protection of those who disclose information, not only those who disclose corruption, but all investigators. And we were working at real mechanisms how to do all this. I would like to mention that the organization that I represent, the mission is to protect Article 19 of Convention of Declaration on Human Rights, and we are the members of the initiative that is called 11, and we are represented in many countries. Why we are here today? Because expert community, public and journalists, they are concerned about the articles that are proposed by the presidential office and the implementation, and we believe that we should have one comprehensive mechanism that would protect those people who disclose information, and this law should cover all the categories of people. It should protect everyone. This is not only about the people who disclose corruption, this is also about those people who disclose, for example, some violations concerning human rights, who work in environment sector. So the vector and specificity is really diverse. Also, we should state that this law, it should fully correspond to directives of the European Union that were voted on in April this year. They were supported by the majority of countries, and Ukraine for a long time is trying to become the member of the European Union. We are moving in this direction. That's why our legislation should correspond to these norms. It is also important to say that what we wanted to see, the most important points that should be included in the draft law, real mechanism should be created for anonymity of those people who disclose information. This is not only about corruption, these are about violations as well, some crimes, not only corruption. This person should be protected if this person works in a big corporation or in an enterprise, and this person do not want people to know his or her name, so they should be able to inform anonymously. Because, for example, in Amsterdam or in Serbia, we see when investigators speak with journalists, and the journalists who carry out this investigation, this journalist is just killed. And we have such problems concerning environment journalists, and this is really terrible when this happens in European democratic nations. In 2009, Alexei Goncharov, a college expert, was killed, and his wife also suffered. And Vadim Komarov, his blogger and activist, he was attacked on, and he died in 1.5 months later. And he blamed the administration of facility, the penitentiary facility number 62, because they committed some violations in the field of alcohol procurement. Also, there should be pre-trial protection for these people, and there should be immunity provided for these people who disclose information, and also this person should be provided financial protection, labor protection, labor guarantees, legal guarantees should be provided, and the person may choose how they inform this information through different channels. External, internal, and regulatory channels may be used. So this list that we've mentioned, this list is not full. It is in process, and the draft law that was registered in the Verkhovna Rada, we are ready to work on it, but we see that there are many articles and provisions that provide real mechanisms, not declarative mechanisms, not just those that concern anti-corruption actions, but also those needed by people who disclose information, and through measures that are proposed by this draft law, people may be well protected. And now I give the floor to Oksana and Nesterenko to continue the discussion. Dear colleagues, thank you for being with us today. First, I would like to mention that we were invited to participate in discussion on Monday to the presidential administration. I would like to speak about positive things. Yes, of course, we greet the initiative of the president and presidential administration to create guarantees to protect investigators. This is good that they started with the anti-corruption investigations, and they raise this issue, they have proper attitude to this issue, but we would like to draw attention to the fact that any good initiative may turn bad if there is no comprehensive approach, comprehensive solution of the problem. Now, it is difficult to say how this draft law will look like, and when it will be registered to the Verkhovna Rada. Of course, there are positive things, positive changes that are introduced to the codes, the civil code, to the code on the judiciary, and code on labor, and the protection of investigators is reinforced. But we should say that these are a big category of these people. They inform about some illegal actions, about some corrupt cases, and Lyudmyla told us about equality, human rights, but some information may not relate to corruption cases. But if these people are not protected, there will be negative corporate culture where the investigators won't be respected, even in new anti-corruption institutions. For example, a person got information that a colleague abused office, but we may not say about a crime in this case. So he is trying to inform through the internal channels, but there are no such channels. And the situation is like this. Inside the organization, this person is perceived negatively, and this person who abused office has positive image. It results in good attitude to abuse of office, and in the future it will lead to corruption. And those changes that are now proposed, they do not solve this problem. This is first. Second, even these positive changes, they establish channels of communication. These are the norms that were in the previous draft law developed by public initiative of 11, and this is about confidentiality issues, but we didn't see this draft law. We should see it. But during the discussions, we saw that there is no clear legal identification how this person who disclosed information should act in order not to be accused that he disclosed information with limited access. In this case, he will be brought to criminal responsibility for disseminating such information. Also, there are problems in the media. There is a discussion concerning 10%. Yes, in the draft law that was proposed before, we had such saying as 10%. But now new surveys show that these 10%, they won't create protection for investigator, and from the other side, they will prevent formation of positive image of investigators, because now for Ukraine, it is important to provide more protection to investigators. They should not be prosecuted by their own colleagues, law enforcement bodies. We should create positive perception in society concerning investigators to show that they are not informants, but they want to increase the quality of life in society. And this is the reason why they provide this information. And sometimes they are really in danger. You may lose your job, and people won't have a good attitude towards you. You won't be their friend or colleague, and this is a serious threat. So I really believe that this initiative that was started by the Office of the President, if they introduce such changes and they will be adopted concerning investigators, this is good, except these 10%. And I, as a representative of a crack, we as experts, we call on the president to create a separate working group to develop a comprehensive draft law concerning protection of those people who disclose information. And they should adhere to all the documents mentioned by Lyudmyla, and we have basis for this. The draft law that was developed by the public, and 30 experts participated from Ukraine and from abroad. This draft law was actively developed and promoted by the Iryna and her anti-corruption entity. So we should provide comprehensive protection for investigators, for all of them, and these should be continuous steps, consecutive steps. We should protect investigators of corruption cases, but also we should protect others, because this is the direct violation of the directive of the European Union, because they say that all people who disclose information should be properly protected. I believe that we should protect labor rights of investigators, and we should reinforce the responsibilities of NAZK to protect such people, and if the initiative of the president is supported in the parliament, that will be super. But this won't resolve the problem. This is just mending the situation, but not resolving it. In order to do it better, we should not mend the dips, but to build a new road. That's why we need a comprehensive law. And the president and his administration, they have a chance to be real reformers in the sphere of protection of those people who disclose information, and to be with Australia, Great Britain, Japan, and other countries who have systemic and really good laws on protection of those people who disclose information. And I call on them to create the working group. There are great experts on human rights, on freedom of information, to create a working group and to create a quality draft law and to adopt it. Now you have political will. You have a needed number of deputies. All depends on you. Thank you.
Maybe we shall maybe we will give the floor to Matthew Schaaf, director of the Freedom House. Good afternoon. Good. My colleagues asked me to tell a little bit about Freedom House opinion to this issue, to the issue of protection of the investigators. This is a very important issue for democratic society, and this is one of the issues which we took into consideration in our reports on the freedom in the world. One question is in our methodology, whether investigators, journalists, investigative journalists are protected and they can feel safe and they investigate violations in the society. In our opinion, this concerns transparency in society, in the state, in investigating the actions of bureaucrats and civil servants. There are some laws which protect investigators, but we think they are not sufficient. Protection is insufficient in Ukraine, in our opinion. We support at the legislative level improvements. Improvements are needed to protect investigators in Ukraine. If talking about the law, potential law, it should be drafted, taken into consideration the opinions of all stakeholders based on expert assessments and experts' opinion, and taking into account the international practices, international obligations of Ukraine and international law. The investigation is civil activism actions, activities, and they could be very useful for society. For example, investigation of violations in prisons, investigations into contaminants in our air, in food which is produced by manufacturers, and use of national budget. Investigators under the law, all investigators should be covered under the law with the protection. And this is in the interests of society. Investigations they are referred to the freedom of expression, freedom of speech. They are the rights to disclose information, and the United Nations and other international institutions recognize us as a freedom of expression right. Now I'm quoting. special reporter on the freedom of expression. The laws which protect confidentiality, they should concern not only professional journalists but also similar persons who provide to the society wide access to information in a society interests. For example, bloggers and writers, academicians, and members of NGOs, advocacy NGOs, and anonymity and confidentiality matter for investigations and investigators to protect them from potential revenge for their actions. They are the key issues. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. I think that now I will give the floor to Iryna Kushnir, who will explain us why this draft law concerns much about the civil rights, about human rights. Good afternoon. I think that this is the first attempt of the authorities, the presidential office, to start a serious discussion of the investigator topic. Before this, it was only international institutions, NGOs, and civil society organizations who talked about this. But now the Ombudsman Office, together with the Ombudsman Office, we discussed the options, to find the options which could be best, and the civil society agreed on our proposals, but our authorities, they did not respond and they were not interested in this issue. So far we see that there is interest, and amendments are necessary. I greet and invite any initiatives which will help to improve Ukrainian legislation, to bring it up to the standards of European Union. Investigators are not people who try to revenge or who pursue their own interests. Investigators are people who know socially important information which could be a component of criminal investigation. This could be an offense which can be prosecuted in criminal or administrative order. It could be just socially important information, not only information for criminal or administrative investigations. When information should be reported and journalists or civil society activists think this information is important, and civil servants who do not disclose this information, which of social importance, they always say, I understand you, but who will help me if now I disclose this information, but my management is against this and I will lose my job? Yes, you have the right to go to court, and you have labor rights, but this civil servant then is alone against the system, and for 2, 3, 4 years this person is in the court proceedings, and as a result he or she gets only negative consequences for his or her life. In such law system, legal system in the country, we cannot expect that the civil servants will be willing to disclose socially important information. So the legislation primarily should be reliable and protect the civil servants so that they are not alone against the system. We are not talking about changing only legislation. We are talking about changing the mentality, talking that you should be active. Everything starts with the society. You should be motivated and responsible. We need to offer real protection to people. So far, this protection is unavailable in the legislation, so all calls are only populism and illusions. This is not serious talk. There are international standards in place and international practices in place. There is a draft law. We are ready to discuss it and to involve best lawyers. The civil society has been working on this for several years, and we invested money and human resources in this. We will build new mentality, new paradigm in the society. It is important that all issues are considered. Not only gaps are filled or mended. Let's imagine that all initiatives that have already been drafted, which are not connected to anti-corruption fighting, then they will again be not considered. Yes, the arguments could be voiced out against all other investigations, not only anti-corruption. For several years, this discussion has been continued. If these draft laws which do not concern corruption will be postponed again, this will bring to disappointment among the civil society. The regime need to build the new path to change the society, to change the protection. I believe that Ukrainian society has active people, activists who will inform socially important information, and they will disclose environmental and labor violations as well. But to this end, we need legislative framework. We cannot build active society which is ready to fight for their individual rights, but we are for building the law system which protect people. Civil society's experts have already done everything, have put best efforts so that we can talk about specific clauses which have already been drafted. To this end, we need not much time. We need 1 or 2 meetings for expert discussion and submitting this draft law to the parliament.
Now I give the floor to Olexander Kalitenko, legal advisor at Transparency International Ukraine. Now Alexander will tell us about international experience concerning protection of whistleblowers, and also that society should build proper attitude and respect to people who provide this information.
Дуже добрий день. Transparency International.
Good afternoon, Transparency International Ukraine. As accredited agency in Ukraine of Transparency International, we believe that there should be a separate law on protection of whistleblowers that will provide proper guarantees of protection to such people, and they should correspond to best well experiences in practices. And we see that those international practices that exist, they develop. 5 years ago, I could only dream about such directive of the European Union that was adopted this year, and it establishes the highest standards, and It is really more progressive than those documents that we had before. And the European Union 5 years ago was not ready to speak about protection of whistleblowers. Yes, we have big prospects in this area, especially in the member countries. And I see that those laws that were adopted recently, I may provide example of Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Northern Macedonia, that are practically candidates. They are the candidates to membership, and they adopt needed laws that correspond to international and world standards. Transparency International Ukraine is ready to join to discussions and join development of such draft law on whistleblowers in Ukraine using our international expertise. And we are ready to provide help in order that the new law correspond best world experience. Imagine, for example, that whistleblower is somewhere in the restaurant and he finds out that the owner of the network uses fish that is not fresh because he would like to earn more because this is business. And you go to this restaurant and you may get poisoned, and the results, the consequences will be unpredictable. And for example, there is no whistleblower who is ready to inform you. For example, those people who work in the kitchen or those who supply this fish, they saw that this fish expired. So if only we protect those people who disclose corruption, this will be the narrowing of protection. We should provide protection to other people who inform about environment, safety of food products, and other matters, and international standard. And Oksana mentioned that there is broad definition, and this is not about public, but also about private sector, not only workers who are working in the firm and organization, but also volunteers, suppliers, subcontractors, and there should be guarantees of labor rights. And these whistleblowers, they should not be fired. They should be protected by law. And we saw negative experience in Portugal. There was such a practice to dismiss such people who provided information about threat or harm to public interests, and they just dismissed these people, and this is not a good practice. And also the change of labor conditions, so-called change of labor conditions, that deteriorates the condition of whistleblower or his close ones. This is also a practice we should fight against, and we should fight it at the legal level in order that people be protected from transfers, from dismissals. And in many countries we see that there are problems with confidentiality and anonymity of the whistleblower. Sometimes there is no responsibility for violations of confidentiality and disclosure of name of whistleblower. And this responsibility is also a part of world experience and international standards. And we should pay attention to this. This will allow whistleblowers to feel protected. Also the channels of communication, internal, external, and regulatory channels. For example, there is positive experience in Finland. The legislation does not envisage internal channels, but the culture is so high, corporate culture, that the organization creates such channels, and they are well protected because of this. Law is not enough. if we are speaking about the world experience, we need the proper culture and positive attitude towards whistleblowers, in order not to consider them as informants, and the state should get involved, and public organizations should get involved in the campaigns to change the attitude towards whistleblowers and to reinforce their role in society as those who protect public interests. For example, you go to the drugstore to buy some medicines. You may remember about American example. For example, American experience, worker of the drugstore disclosed information that one big corporation sold some drugs, and these drugs were not approved by the state body that should confirm the efficacy of this drug. And this pharmacist, he got more than $20 million for this information. So we believe that remuneration is important, but this is not enough without comprehensive protection of whistleblowers and guarantees that are provided by international experience. Time is lacking. So, to sum up, yes, there is world experience, and there are good results, but we should understand the critical point that Ukraine now is going through. All of us have friends or relatives, close ones, who during the meetings, they speak about their work or what they saw in restaurants and drugstores, in metro. So people speak about what they saw. They may provide this information about some violations. And what is the result of such discussions? What can we do? Life is like this. The situation is always the same. What can we do if no one listens to us? And this is about the protection of people, of those people who provide information. And this information may not necessarily result in some punishment. Maybe there will be investigation and then it will be revealed that nothing wrong happened, but there should be confidentiality guarantees, there should be a proper body. Not only anti-corruption bodies, but a special body that will carry out proper investigation. Without all this, without legislation, we won't be able to go to proper actions. We will only continue speaking. We should implement measures. We should inform population. We should improve proper laws, and we should monitor implementation in order to change paradigm of thinking from Soviet, where a person could not take decisions, and to go to European thinking, where people fight violations and all the system works for prevention. If, for example, management knows that the person anytime may confidentially provide information and there will be disclosure and results and consequences, then they will think whether they would like to commit such a violation at all. Dear guests, we have 5 times until the end of press briefing. Maybe you have questions. We are ready to answer. Please raise your hand first and introduce yourself and ask your questions.
Ми всім дякуємо за увагу.
No questions. Thank you for your attention. We will see you soon.